Okay. Dungeon Degenerates. Hand of Doom. At all. So, all in all, I really liked this one. Trying to figure out the why. And I think at core, it's really the, hey, I've been looking most of my life for something that, managed some of the trappings of a role-playing game. Characters that advance, being able to wander around searching for, trying to accomplish some great goal. That is kind of a thing I like in my role-playing games. I don't like the, oh yeah, we're just kind of buffeting around soldiers for hire or whatever. I don't mind if the players feel that way, but I feel like there has to be some greater story to be told than just that. Otherwise, I never was into like the Fafner and Grey Mouser books, which were very much like the, well, off to another adventure, I much more want something where I feel like maybe it takes a while to be revealed, but there's some great story at play. More than just, yep, here we are hunting orcs, And the problem is, most of the games that I've seen that give, some of the trappings of a role-playing game don't manage on all the other fronts. Mage Knight kind of does, but it's a one-shot. Wizards kind of does, but it's a one-shot. Not to say that you only play it once, but you don't have sort of this, you don't have a series of things going on. Recently I did Dragonholt. I thought that did a really, really good job of presenting a choose-your-own-adventure type situation, and to the extent that they actually figured out how to do combat using that kind of rule book in a nice fashion where you weren't rolling dice or whatever. I don't know if that's better or worse, but it was very cleverly done that they managed to get it to hang together the way they did. But some of the older games of this style, well, of the kind of fantasy adventuring style, probably, the gold standard in a sense is Magic Realm. Well, Magic Realm, you don't have any great, unifying goal that's driving your character at any point. You're trying to win, and you're trying to fill this set of capabilities. It feels like a game of careers, if you're familiar with the board game, where you're just kind of, wow, that brings something interesting to mind. Like, we never used to say, oh, let's play a board game, right? Board gaming is kind of an in thing now, but to us, board game always meant the family style stuff, the Monopoly, stuff like that. I mean, I would be into playing those usually, but we were never like, oh, it's a board gaming night. It was gaming night, whether, whatever we did. But anyway, and role-playing was the same way. We'd say, oh, let's play a role-playing. Although that was more likely to be expressed because we'd go long droughts without a role-playing game sometimes. But I digress, as always. Magic Realm's problem for me, well, there were a couple. One is the intricacy of the interactions and that you could plan things out, and maybe they wouldn't go exactly as planned. There was some luck involved in it, and in certain cases quite a bit. You had no chance without planning things out, and that's kind of my problem with Mage Knight too. There's some luck involved, but you have no chance if you're not, really sharply trying to figure things out. This one has some of that in it that you have to do. It's not rolling dice against monsters or whatever. It's got a more intricate combat system where you have to put some puzzle and some brain power to it, but you're relying a fair deal on luck at the same time. And I like mixtures like that. I don't really like a game to be all luck, and I don't really like a game to be too much pre-planning and thinking. Anyway, this one gives you a nice goal. It gives you an interesting option, an interesting situation where even in the base game, you have several different paths you can follow. Now, I suspect that these little, from what I've seen about these 4 new missions inside, these are just a string of missions, and you don't have the kind of branching that you do in the base game. The base game is awesome because the branching is like, okay, well, you chose one thing. That means you're going to be following this path now. That gives you some replay capability, but it also gives you some room even on the first play to say, well, I'm going to role play this out and play it how I want my characters to be. Do I want them to be good? Do I want them to serve evil? Do I want them to just, be trying to survive? Whatever. And I may not have enough information. I may not succeed in the right things. I may be forced into a certain path, but that's okay. At least I'm given a choice, even if I can't follow it in the end. Others that kind of had similar kind of feels to them that I can think of. Talisman. Well, Talisman broadly spreads you out, over all these different boards and everything, but the pure roll and move and then, draw a card and you either get something good or you fight something or whatever, never really appealed to me. And then the things that you could kind of strategize about were primarily things that had to do with really, really knowing what you can get out of certain locations, especially the city, what you can get out of the city, how you can turn the city into a huge advantage. I never liked Talisman much at all. I played a whole lot of it, though, because, I don't know, my ex-wife and I, my ex-wife kind of liked it, and it was easy enough. It was something we could just do that wasn't, I don't know, tiny. Like, when we looked at, let's play a couple hands of Magic, that was just, but Talisman and Crayon Rails were 2 things that she liked that we didn't have to put a lot of effort into. We could just slap it down and play it. It would be a little longer, a little meatier than something tiny, but at the same time, they weren't really games that I particularly liked. With her, I was able to play a lot of games. We did, most of my war games at that time, for example, but once each. Very few of them did we want to come back to and say, well, let's figure this out and see if we can beat it, or understand it better. That doesn't feel right with war games. Somehow to me with war games, what you really want to do is you kind of want to experience them and, yep, got what I wanted from this, and I'll put it away for a while and I'll come back to it. I don't really want to play them at all competitively usually. But some people do. And yet again, I'm a wandering. Okay. So, another one, Tales of the Arabian Nights. Now, Tales gives you this beautiful, much like the Dragonholt does, choose your own adventure type thing, but it's very, very random, and you get randomized and you go all over the place. There's no story in place, and that can be a little bit disturbing to me. Talisman, by the way, has kind of this world-shaking, ending, conquering type, victory conditions, which pleases me. It's kind of the one thing it gets right. But for me at least, the Tales doesn't really have that for the most part. Tales is about the story and what happens to your character, and it's fun and everything, but it doesn't fulfill that itch. And another thing is, what I found with Tales was I played a fair amount of it, quite a bit actually, but it kind of loses itself. It's like you don't really want to keep playing it because you know most of what can happen at least. You're not going to be surprised anymore. I don't feel like that's the case with this. This feels more like the way it plays out is more like kind of an Arkham Horror type thing where you're moving around trying to resolve a specific issue, and then and you get to play some strategy into that, trying to resolve that issue, there's some luck involved, certainly. And it feels like you've got a reasonable goal. Another thing this has very much in common with Arkham Horror is all these decks. There's decks for all the different basic sectors of the board. There's decks for all kinds of different things, and that's kind of a neat way of handling things. It's very, very card intensive, and thus at one time at least that would have been very, very expensive. And I'm not going to say prohibitively because there were games that did it, although they tried to stick with these smaller cards for the most part, and they didn't have as good a quality in them. On the downside, what is the downside? Well, the rule book is a little messy, but I'm not a big fan of the artwork, but some people are very much into it, so I don't want to, that's a matter of taste. I find it too busy and kind of distracting, and I find it causes more problems and doesn't really please me, so it's kind of, it reminds me of some of the really hideous maps from the 1980s for games, but in a certain way. But I guess the biggest downside is probably what my wife has tried to express to me about it, which is, okay, I'm trying, to get these numbers moved. What the hell? What kind of goal is that? And I understand that, she wants things to be much more grounded. Go kill this, do this. I can, make connections in my head and understand to myself, lowering certain numbers means making the realm safer. It's that simple. I can picture that, and it doesn't bother me at all. But for her, that was kind of it made what she thought was a very, very pretty game, as opposed to me. She's an art person, I'm not, one that had really cute different characters in her view. Just, the imagery that they provide on them. There's just this mixture of like cute and foreboding at the same time that she really, really liked. And that, that was very appealing to her. But when we actually got to playing it, her feeling was, it's just not connected enough. It felt a little too much like, a little too abstracted in terms of, fight the monsters, get a number down, fight them, and I want to get the numbers down more than I want to get the monsters killed, I guess. And, when you start taking the story and turning it more into, I don't know, kind of like a pandemic-like experience. I'm not entirely sure that I understand her objection, because she likes games like Pandemic, although there you're heading to, stomp one particular, you're like, wow, the disease is here, I must stomp it, as opposed to this sort of broad scale, keep the numbers all down so we don't get screwed. So I think that's probably one of the biggest objections. Another is there's a lot of fiddliness to it, but there is an Arkham Horror too, where you're keeping. Here it's probably worse because you have, especially with the campaign game, because you're going to have so many loot cards and so many experience skill cards and so many different things that you have to keep track of that are taking place. And again, the rule book's a little messy. Each monster has its own special abilities you have to look up. All kind of stuff that you're going to have to do rules lookups for, or at least check the compendium on the back where all the abilities are. Let's talk a little about the components. First of all, the cards. Modern, high-quality cards. When I first saw cards like this in a game, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I thought only Risk had good cards. Well, it's becoming kind of a standard these days. You have the map, which, as I said, has interesting imagery on it, but to me it's so garish that it kind of defeats some of what I'd like about a situation. But it is a particular style that, whatever kind of metal it is that it appeals to, that's its aimed at target audience. And the fact that it can draw me in because of the gameplay is a really nice, and the way the story develops and everything is a really nice feature that even though I'm not necessarily into this, and I say the same things about the Lords of the Eternal Evil stuff, the fact that Cave Evil could really draw me in, I thought that's an awesome game, in addition to aiming at this niche art side of things. The character cards, really, really stiff, slick. I feel a little funny about the slick. It feels almost like, I don't know, some of the pornos had this kind of gloss to them. So that's what it kind of brings back to my mind. But anyway, one thing that kind of bugged me is you don't really get stat improvements. You get the skills. If you had stat improvements, that might give you a little bit too much min-maxing. And the dice resolution system, rolling bunches of different colored dice in order to see if you succeed, you have a little bit of capability to fine-tune how your dice are going to work based on how offensive or defensive you want to be and what your skills are and everything. Really, you don't need stat improvements in there. You've got temporary stat bonuses from some of the effects that show up on the counters. Speaking of the counters, they're all nice. The stuff that came with the expansion appears essentially printed the same as the stuff that didn't. I can't tell a difference. They may have all been printed at the same time because it was a Kickstarter. I don't know quite how, I don't know how the Kickstarter type stuff ends up working in any given case. You have 2-player aids. They're completely different, and that may be one of my minor complaints. Of course, you can always photocopy and print these out, but all the status conditions are here. But not the monster status conditions, just the character ones. Shit. Okay. Yeah, it was the monster status conditions that I needed to look up most recently, and that was kind of a bother that those weren't easily available, but I didn't see the character ones existed, so. Let's see what else. The counters are counters, but they're thick, they're serviceable. There is nothing to be said bad about any of the components. Even the box feels kind of like a GMT armored box in a lot of ways. The insert, well, you can see I'm full up here. And that's with just 2 of the expansions that come with counters and cards, and 2 of the little booklets in here. And the next expansion comes with its own box, though. So, if and when I pick that up, that'll be able to hold its own in there. Overall, this did a lot for me. It really delivered its own. One of the things is the world. The world excited the hell out of me in the sense that, this isn't just your generic, Talisman world without a story behind it. This has a rich backstory to it. All the books give you that. It strikes me that maybe somebody had a role-playing game and converted it to a board game, in a lot of ways. Like they had a role-playing universe, and just the depth of the number of different critters, the number of different, that are just very different, right? And the storyline and everything to it. And it feels like somebody who put a lot of effort into making a unique world. And I don't really think that that's too common in the board game world. Usually you want to play off either the old tropes or you draw off of something that's already existing. So that's very nice. Whether that started as a role-playing game or a board game, I don't know. You know, I don't pay a lot of attention to the backstory to things until I get further into them than I am into this. It definitely kicked me into wow, I really want to play RuneQuest again. Unfortunately, I'm not the kind of person who is very good at drumming up players for stuff. I mean, I've got like, maybe one person who's willing to play. Great. And it's a person who is very difficult to fit into any kind of schedule where they'd actually be able to play. So that seems a bit iffy. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this. Price-wise, like I said, buying the original box set, it's well worth it. It feels like it's perfectly reasonable for what you get for the price. The expansions are going to start bringing that price up high pretty quickly. I don't know if the new box Kickstarter, it seemed to be pretty reasonably priced on the Kickstarter at least. One reason why I'm thinking about doing it is because it's, maybe it's over, I don't know. But it's definitely, if you do get hooked on this and just go out and buy the expansions separately or whatever, you're starting to rack up a pretty good bill on it. This ran me close to $200 for everything that I got. But the base game was only $80, and what you saw, and most of this is the base game essentially. If you want to play it a lot, it's definitely worth getting the expansions, because maybe not for me, because I probably won't play it too many more times. But the advantage of the expansions is they add more characters, so you can do different combinations. And you can basically experience the whole damn thing over again. The story, it's nice to experience it for the first time, but it's not necessary that that you be surprised by the events in it. In fact, kind of like in Tales and some other games, you're probably going to want to say, well, I want to be surprised again. I want that feeling again. So I'm not going to make the same choices. I'm going to try to aim the story in a different direction and see how that works out. Sometimes you don't have a choice, though. Like the game my wife and I were playing, we were getting forced down a certain path because we lost the head initially. Anyway, I guess that's about all I have to say about it. I don't know what I'm going to next. I know I'm looking at Pericles, but I can't make any guarantees that's going to be next. There are other thoughts too. Let's send this up.